So I think it's important today to at least get out into the collective unconscious. This video on what we don't know about life. Just the plain facts that, if we did know them, would change things forever. Would change everything. Would change our perception on how things go, on how things are. Would relieve our anxieties, because all of us, seemingly, has a gnawing anxiety in the back of our heads. Maybe not all of us. I'm not going to speak for everybody. But everybody at some point in their life has experienced gnawing anxiety in the back of their head. Why? Why, for some reason, are we so bamboozled by this life? And we pretend like we're not. A lot of us. Why is there mass mental illness? Why are people so miserable? Why are we so confused? Why does nobody know, where this country is going to go? Why are we so concerned about everything? Well, if we knew some simple facts about life, and you could say they're metaphysical facts. You could say, oh, well, these facts are just metaphysical, so it's theoretical, and we don't really know. But really, the whole distinction between physical, regular, and the metaphysical is just a conception in our heads. Just like mind and matter, just like as discussed in this book, The Way of Zen by Alan Watts. So the difference between Eastern and Western philosophy when it comes to idealism. So in Buddhist philosophy, Siddha is meant to refer to the mind. It's not directly equivalent to the mind, but it's something like it. So in the West, with idealism, we have the idea of the mind, and then we have matter. So the mind gives rise to matter. So that's Western idealism. Whereas in Buddhist, Eastern idealism, roughly, they don't make the distinction between mind and matter. So the Yogacara does not, therefore, discuss the relation of forms of matter to mind. So we have the idea of the physical and then the metaphysical, the matter and then the mind, right? We have those ideas in our head. But in reality, it's all one. In reality, there's no difference between the mind and what it observes. Because could you separate your own consciousness from the world that it observes? It's the same thing. So the Buddhists know this. And so it discusses the relation of forms to mind instead of matter to mind. And it concludes that the forms, concludes that they are forms of mind, not forms to mind, as if they're two separate things, but it's forms of mind, what we call matter. Right? So we make the distinction between the metaphysical and the physical, and we get kind of, we think it's just silly to talk about metaphysical. It's not academically respectable. If you go to a doctor and start talking about the metaphysical, they're just going to laugh in your face. Well, who's really the fool? We make the distinction between metaphysical and physical, but it's really a mental distinction in our heads. So, you could call these facts metaphysical, but in reality, it's just the facts of being. If you knew certain things about your life and about your existence itself, then it would change everything. And the only reason why we don't know this is because, to quote Henri Bergson in his book, The Creative Mind, on page 1, our philosophy has lacked most of all precision. Philosophical systems are not cut to the measure of the reality in which we live. They are too wide for reality. Examine any one of them, choosing as you see fit, and you will see that it could equally well apply to a world in which neither plants nor animals have existence, only men, in which men would quite possibly do without eating or drinking, where they would neither sleep nor dream, nor let their minds wander, where born decrepit they would end as babes in arms, where energy would return up the slope of its dispersion, and where everything might as well easily go backwards and be upside down. So that's our philosophy. It's crazy, right? We don't even examine it. But the implication taught in school is a philosophy which doesn't make sense, which has no basis in reality. The physical, skeptical, medical, it's ridiculous. It's like our philosophy, Alan Watts describes it as a Newtonian billiards game, where the atoms bang each other around. They have no underlying continuum, no underlying guiding force. And we know this to be true. We know this not to be true. Now with our physics and with our modern day scientists, they even say that we're in a simulation ever since the 1970s. But of course, that's not integrated into normal education. But we still think in terms of the 18th century myth that everything is just bits and pieces put together like a machine. So the whole of our philosophy that we all unconsciously subscribe to, even if we're religious, is the philosophy which took God out of the picture. Because we got tired of it. And you know why they took God out of the picture? Is because it's meaningless to say that there's a God. The question of whether or not to say that God governs everything is a meaningless statement. Well, that's the same thing as saying everything is everything. So it's meaningless to make the assumption that there is a God. So they just got rid of it. But you know what's funny is that they kept the laws. They got rid of the lawmaker, but they kept the laws. And so we have laws of nature, and these laws of nature assume that we live in a Newtonian billiards game where things just bang each other around and it's random. That's the subconscious implication that is put into our minds in education. And you might as well call education a mandatory hypnosis center. Because what do? How do you hypnotize someone? Well, simply by talking to them. Of course, they need to consent to it first. But you get someone who's tired, who's a little bit sleepy. You bring them in and you talk to them. Say, you are a frog. You are a chicken. You will balk like a chicken once I snap my fingers. And then they believe it. And then they actually do. Because you've hypnotized them. Now, what's the difference between our education, our factory style education, borrowed by the Prussians? Borrowed by the Prussians, which became the Germans, is the factory style education, which is mass education. What do you think that's meant for? Mass education. We're going to educate everybody. And we think, oh, it's such a good thing. Everybody becomes literate. Well, is it? I would rather be illiterate. I would rather not be able to think and live in the world in its suchness, in its thusness, in how it is, than be someone who thinks all the time and can't stop it. So our education system, it makes children who have no idea what they're getting into, who don't want to do it, who I remember personally me. I was very depressed when I found that I had to go to first grade and that this would be the rest of my life. Very depressing. That the majority of my time is spent in that building. So I would wake up at early at the crack of dawn, around starting in middle school would be 6 o'clock in the morning. Wow. You wake a kid up, probably the kid had no sleep, playing video games all night. You send them to school. They're tired. They don't want to be there. They haven't had their coffee yet, so they don't really drink coffee. They're tired and they're exhausted. They don't want to be there, but they have to. So they're going to sit down and they're going to read the papers that are carefully designed and written to psychologically make you think a certain way about the world. Like, for example, our ridiculous philosophy will talk about the ancient Egyptians and talk about them as if they're narcissistic dumbasses. The king had all of his subjects bow down to him as a god. I don't know exactly how they would describe the ancient Egyptians, but they would describe But we describe the ancients and the ancient Egyptians as if they're just dumbasses. They're just, and that we're the smart ones. So that's the implication. What if it was the reverse? I know certainly for a fact that it is the reverse. Our spiritual abilities, our abilities to yield the power of the universe, which we are, has completely diminished. Unless you're spiritually awakened. But imagine you have a kid go through 12 grades every single day, except for the summer, except for the weekends, except for the holidays, 180 days of the year, each year. They have to go sit in these buildings, read things that you prescribe to them, and then you talk at them all day, and they're sleepy. They don't give a shit. So how do you hypnotize someone? You talk at them. Especially if they're a little unconscious for it. So the teachers are really like the hypnotists. And then the forms that they give out are the most important thing because, of course, you read what it says and you do work. You answer their questions and you fill out the form answering their questions correctly in the way that you expect them, in the way that they expect you to answer it. So you create their minds. You create people's perception on the world. And it's such a vague philosophy. Such a ridiculous philosophy. It says again, our philosophy might as well be one where animals don't exist, plants don't exist, men born decrepit and end in babes in arms just don't think, they don't let their minds wander. Might as well just not eat or drink. It's just our philosophy of the world is vague, so we have no idea what this world we're living in is. Imagine, they tell us that there's this infinite universe. Goes on forever. Goes on forever. Millions of, billions of galaxies within a cluster. And then probably millions of clusters, infinite, right? Infinite. How many planets are there in this one galaxy? I don't know, a lot. Well, how many aliens do you think there are? None? Really? You don't think there are any? And see, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, and the people who will say, who will not take the idea seriously, that they're actually extraterrestrials. They probably don't mean to, unless they do. But they don't mean to because it's been entrained into our minds to not even think about it and to think that it's just a ridiculous idea that there are aliens out there, that we're the only ones on this little planet. Everywhere else, just void, nothing. Imagine someone actually believing that. Well, back in the 70s, back in the 50s, people believed that. Imagine. I mean, we only knew, in the 1920s, we thought that the galaxy was the only thing that there was. Imagine what we know now. And that, but every point in history, everybody thinks that they know it all until they realize that they don't. So at this point in history, the societal idea is that vaccines are good for you, even though many people know this not to be true. And we have our ideas that we think are respectable and make sense. But then give us 10 years and we'll find out that we were ridiculous back in 2020, 2022. So imagine someone, so it's trained into our heads to focus on only our conventions, really. Not to focus on the universe itself, not to focus on our inner being, not to focus on space and other life forms, or the things that we can't see or can't detect with our measurement tools. We're really just trained to focus on our ideas about the world and our conventions and how to work the machines and how to do math and do literature and focus on our history. But never are we taught how to be ourselves. Never are we taught how to live. I mean, it's like, when do we ever get the chance? We're raised by parents who incessantly try to civilize us. But when you try to civilize them, a child, what does that give the implication? What kind of implication is that when you incessantly try to civilize a child? That they need to be civilized because they're some sort of monster. So in the back of our minds, that's the idea. Is that we ourselves are sinful in our nature. Original sin. I'll tell you what original sin really means in a little bit. But we're never taught actually how to live, but we're thrown into this corporate machine, learning how to write and use the conventions. But we don't even know how to be ourselves. We don't even know how to live. And then we're thrown into the world, bamboozled, tricked. We're given the idea that someday down the line there's going to be something good. Where is it? But I'll get to how to create that something good at any point you want. So then our society is completely crazy. And I came up with some rap lyrics, just a little couple lines where it's, if I can remember, it's a little while ago my life became a trip to me. Ever since I took those tryptamines. They said that I was crazy. I didn't become crazy. I just became not. Fuck, I forget what it said, but it was a really good rap line. But anyways, we live in this society where everybody doesn't know what's going on. So everybody is really in some sort of delusion, some sort of idea. And it's crazy, so we pretend like we know what's going on to give off the impression to other people. But really, deep inside, there's quaking anxiety for even the people who you would think are the toughest ones. Quaking anxiety. Because we don't have the knowledge. Or it's available to all of us, but we don't take it seriously. And to take it seriously or sincerely, may I say, will change your life completely. So, the basic fact to life is that we ourselves, all that exists, basically, essentially, all that exists, ever, is one consciousness. Is one consciousness. That's all that exists. And this one consciousness that we call God, that's so mysterious we don't even know, is us. Is all of us. That what we call God is all of us, and it says it straight out in the Upanishads. Fundamental to the life and thought of India from the very earliest times is the great mythological theme of Atma Yajna, the act of self-sacrifice whereby God gives birth to the world, and whereby men, following the divine pattern, reintegrate themselves with God. That sounds a lot like God sacrificed his only begotten son for the sake of the world. It's exactly the same thing. The act by which the world is created is the same act by which it is consummated. The giving up of one's life as if the whole process of the universe were the type of game in which it is necessary to pass the ball as soon as it is received. Thus, the basic myth of Hinduism is that the world is God playing hide and seek with himself. As Prajapati, Vishnu, or Brahma The Lord, under many names, creates the world by an act of self-dismemberment or self-forgetting, whereby the one becomes many, and the single actor plays innumerable parts. So that's how it is. That is how it is. We are just the one consciousness, and all there is one consciousness. And then in the end, he comes back to himself, only to begin the play once more, the one dying into the many, and the many dying into the one. So, by the act of self-abandonment, God becomes all beings, yet at the same time does not cease to be God. So that's why, I'll say one more thing. For God is divided in play, in make-believe, but remains undivided in reality. That's the whole thing. So when I said our society is living in just like a play, pretend world, literally, it's because for God is divided in play, in Maya, and Maya is fundamental to the Hindu religion, because Maya means play, illusion, creative art, pretend, basically, Maya. And if I could describe Maya to you, Maya is really the illusion, the veil that covers reality. Although it only exists in our heads. So the whole idea of the world being what it is, with separate things, is really our division of the world, and our measurement of the world. And from the word Maya, from the word METR dash in Sanskrit, comes the word Maya. And then from that word also comes measurement, mother, matrix, meter, matter, material. And in order to measure, you need to divide things. If you want to measure a mountain, you put a grid over the mountain in order to measure it in terms of what our units of measurement are. So we divide the mountain into different squares, and we say this mountain is so many squares across and so many squares down, and that's how we measure the mountain. And we do math to figure it out. And that's what we learn in school, right? Because the whole idea of this society is we need to measure the world. So in school, we're taught how to measure everything. And that's the trick they get you into. That's the conspiracy behind this whole thing, behind this whole society, is that they want you to live in a world of Maya, of illusion. And Maya is merely measuring the world in terms of our measurements. So they teach you mathematics and teach you how to think and science so that you can measure the world in terms of your thoughts, so that you won't be living in reality for how it is, but you'll be living in reality for make-believe. So for God is divided in play and make-believe because we think that because we measure the world after we're educated how to measure the world. We measure the world in terms of our units of measurement. In make-believe, it's divided, but it actually remains undivided in reality. So that when the play comes to an end, the individualized consciousness wakes up to find itself divine. That is tremendous. And if you've ever had a psychedelic experience, then you know that to be true as much as you might want to deny it. Because it's a scary thing, because that means it's only you. It's not only the personality, it's not only the you that you think you are, but it's the one universe. It's the one consciousness. Because there could never be anything, there could never be multiple actual things. You see? So in actual reality, there could never be actually multiple actual things. But what gives us the impression that there's multiple actual things is our division of it, our mental division of the world. So like a tree is not separate from the forest itself. A tree is a function of the forest. In the same way, we are a function of the universe. Won't that sound silly? Why does that sound silly to us? We ourselves are a function, are an aspect of the entire universe. So, and it's only the division, the mental division, that separates me from you, which gives us the impression that we're different, but we're actually not. And that the only thing that actually exists is the one consciousness that there is, and that we are all that one consciousness. So that moksha, liberation, my experience with moksha, which incidentally didn't last forever, was that I am the one consciousness ever. I had the experience when smoking weed, actually. Weed can do this for you. I had the experience that I am the consciousness of the universe. Wild, right? Wild. But that's really how it is. That we are all the consciousness of the universe. And that there's nothing different. There's no other consciousnesses. So all that could actually be in reality is one consciousness. And the Buddhists say that there's nothing. It's all the void. They say the void is form, and that form is the void. It's both the same thing. You can't separate. Just like the world of play is an illusion. It doesn't really exist. So the world of play, samsara, which is what this society puts you into, that's a conspiracy, is to keep you going on the wheel of samsara forever, thinking that you're measuring the world and thinking that you actually have a personality and that your personality is the most important thing to uphold. But your personality doesn't exist. Why? Because it's the same thing as saying that an inch exists. Saying that your personality exists, saying that you individually exist, is the same thing as saying that a meter exists. What do you mean a meter exists? My personality exists. I exist. Show me you. Well, it's I. Well, that was a little bit contrived. Can you show me the real you? How could I know the real me? You could never. Because a knife can't cut itself. You can't grab your own hand with this hand. Surely if you had another hand to grab you, then you can know yourself that way. But yourself, the limit to your own knowledge is yourself. Because the Godhead could never be an object of its own knowledge. You could never see your own face. Except, on this camera I can see my own face. But I'm not really seeing my own face. I'm seeing a representation of my face. And in the mirror, I'm seeing a representation of my face. Due to the little light being reflected off me. That I can never see my actual face. That remains a mystery to me. A profound mystery, what my actual face is. Just like in the same way, I can't grab my own hands because I can't know myself. Could you see your own eyes? That's the limit to our own knowledge. And to think that you know yourself is samsara. You know yourself by unknowing yourself. He who shall lose his soul shall save it. He who shall save his soul shall lose it. Because you could never know your own self, because you are the self that is doing the knowing. So there's no other you to know. There's no other you to observe the thinker. You may think that there's a thinker observing the thinker, that there's a self observing the thinker. But the thought of there being a self observing the thinker is another thought in itself, in the stream of thoughts. So the whole idea of this, well, what's actually true, it could never be any other way, that all that exists is one consciousness, and that the matter is the same thing as the consciousness. Matter that we see around us is conscious, is our own consciousness. That's what the entirety of being is one consciousness. And that to think that it's separate is Maya, it's measurement of the world, splitting the world into mental conceptions. And that's the wheel of samsara. But the wheel of samsara is the same thing as nirvana. So the whole time when you're enlightened, you realize that there is nothing to realize. That the whole time what you thought to be samsara was really nirvana. Because samsara is thinking that nirvana is not nirvana. But you're still in nirvana. Nirvana is samsara. And samsara is nirvana. So if we knew straight up, we can know this just intellectually, just to give us the solace. Just to give us the mental solace of going through our day knowing that it's okay. that there's only one consciousness and I am that consciousness. Not the me that I think I am, but the bigger me, the deeper me that observes, that I can never define. I can never see the inspector because I can never inspect the inspector. The inspector could never inspect the inspector. Who's going to guard the guards? Who's going to police the police? Well then, we don't have to know this in actuality. We don't have to feel it. We don't have to live it. But if we simply knew this to be true intellectually, all of the thoughts that might disturb us would be deflected, would be dissolved, because there's no reason to take it seriously. Because you know, in truth, that the only thing that could ever be is one consciousness. Because if I am conscious, then so is the entire universe. And then also, the air does not separate me from everything else. The air connects what I say to be me. So my body extends to the outmost regions of the universe, to infinity. And the Buddhists say that there's nothing, because if there's one thing, only one thing in existence, which could only be the case, there could never be separate things. Because if anything is separate, then what is in between that separation? What fills the gap? There could never be a vacuum. So everything is one. And if it's one, then there's no boundary to that one, so it's unclassifiable, which means it's nothing. Which means everything is nothing because everything is one. So there's no boundary to the one. In order to have a thing, you need another thing as distinct from that thing in order for it to be a thing. In order to have a box, you need the inside of the box and the outside of the box. But if the box is the only thing that there is, then it's not even a box. But it's nothing. So that's all that there is nothing. So if we knew this to be true, that would change our entire attitude on the world. And books like these prove it. They literally prove it. But nobody inquires into it. Our attention has been misdirected towards unimportant things that don't really matter, trivial things. We've been tricked into thinking that the trivial is important, and that what's not trivial, what's seriously not trivial, doesn't exist, or is unimportant. My God, the Hermetic prophecy came true. That fools would walk the earth and mock the wise, and that wise would be regarded as fools, and that the meek shall inherit the earth. But if we know us, basically, what we are is we're the same as God, and God outside there. God outside is not. It's like the one consciousness can experience itself from all sorts of different points of view. So I myself am the one consciousness experiencing itself through the filter of me, of what I say to be me. But God is the one consciousness not experiencing any filters, knowing everything. That's my higher self, is the thing that knows everything, because it doesn't have any filter blocking its perception. But I have a filter blocking my perception because I'm human. And also because we've been tricked. If our education was not to be the way it is, then we would be so much farther ahead. But we've been held back purposely by certain influences who do not want humanity to evolve. But they know that themselves, that their time is short, and that they're just pulling out all the stops to try to pull us down, but it's not even going to work. So that's the funny thing about it. And it's been going on for a long time. And it's going to stop, and we're going to wake up, all of us, and we're going to find out the truth that all we are, that all that exists is one consciousness, and that we are that consciousness, playing hide and seek with itself, basically, so that when you die, you'll realize that you yourself are the one, are it. It's all been me. It's all been me. That's the experience I've had when taking psychedelics. Even when not taking psychedelics, I've asked higher powers to show me the vision, and I realized I had the vision of before my life, it was all me, and I'm just doing this because why not? It doesn't matter. This life, this whole thing doesn't matter because it's just all me. It's just all I. Doing it because I is the only thing that exists. That nothing exists besides I. Besides the I. The one conscious. So if you're God, what do? You got nothing to do. You're the only thing that exists. You don't know how you do, but you just are. And the words that God proclaims is I am. That's it. That's all. That's all God has to say. That's all God can say is I am. And that's literally, there's nothing besides God. So what does God have to do? He wants to play all of these infinite games with himself because he is what exists. And there's nothing else. There's literally nothing else. Imagine that predicament. You're the only thing in existence. That nothing else exists. You're the only thing that exists. Imagine that to be true. Nothing else exists besides me. What do? There's no question of what do you do. What do you do in terms of what? It's only the one consciousness, so what? So this game we're doing, it doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter. And we've been tricked into thinking that it does matter. For why? What meaning does life have besides itself? Life itself has no meaning at all. Because what else could it mean? If life is it, then what else could it mean? There's no purpose for it. It's not purposeful. There's no objective to this life. It's just for its own sake. It's for its own sake. And there's no issue about it. But we've been trained with this gnawing anxiety in the back of our heads to feel like there's something wrong about this thing. But if we all knew that we're the only thing that exists, Nirvana, better than heaven. What's better than heaven? It's Nirvana. And guess what? Nirvana never left. It's only me thinking that Nirvana left, which gives me the impression that Nirvana left. But Nirvana actually never left. It's always been Nirvana. Again, it's only the idea that it's not, that it is. So, the one Godhead is having the dream of this. Is having this dream. That I am it. It's having the dream that I'm a separate human being and I'm just powerless over something else. But actually, another point, well, it's realizing that this is the dream. So the metaphysicians, scientists, metaphysical teachers, they all know this. The physicists too. They all know that this is a dream. The same thing as a dream state. I remember as a kid, I would wake up from in the morning and I would realize, well, this is the continuation of the dream. I didn't know how to verbalize it. I didn't know how quite to verbalize it. But I knew in my bones that this is the continuation of the dream. And when things started to get rough in the house, when things started to get depressing in life, I was like, well, this is the continuation of the dream. And I would remind myself. I knew it when I was a kid, but I just forgot. Because I went to school and I'm taught that the world is real, that it's not a dream, that it's something to be taken seriously. And I just forgot. But this is the dream. It's the same kind of state as your waking life is the same kind of state as your dreaming life. Imagine maybe when you go to sleep at night, you're living an entire life and you just remember little important moments from that life, but you don't remember the entire life. Imagine, and this waking life is really just a dream that you're going to wake up from. But we know regardless that this is a dream, and that this is the dream of the Godhead, of the one Godhead that there is. So if we knew this to be true, what is there to worry about? We examine these facts. There could only be one, and I am that one. Everything is me, and it's my dream. Well, my God, maybe I'll try to lucid dream. Because once you know you're in a dream, you can affect it. And this is where creating your reality comes in. You create your reality not because it's a reality that you create. It's not like there's a you that is the creator and then a reality out there. But it's rather that you are your reality itself. That's simply what you are. That there's no difference between the inside and the outside. So that when you lucid dream, you create the dream that you're living in. You know how to control it, and you know that it itself is what it is. Now, that's creation of reality. Because what you are is the same as it. Because it is the one consciousness which you are. So everything is you. So that whatever you feel yourself to be, the world becomes. You become. Because you embody it, and then you become it. And that's the whole thing behind creating your own reality. It's not you creating something else that is your reality, but it's you creating you. And so if we knew this, we would have no anxieties at all. No anxieties whatsoever, because everything that comes into our life is our own doing, is our own creation. So that we can't blame someone else necessarily because we asked for it. We created it into our lives. That simple. And we have anxiety because we anxiety is the resistance of ourselves, is the resistance of what is, trying to resist ourselves. But as long as we try to resist ourselves, then we're resisting ourselves. And then reality is going to mirror that back to us. So that's the whole key, is realize that it's all you. There's nothing outside of you. Also for the pure fact that you can awaken like this, realizing that what you're experiencing right now is your brain. You don't experience anything outside of your brain, but what you're experiencing is your brain, is your head. You want to look for your head. You see other people, you expect to see your own head if you want to find your own head in the form of other people, because you see other people's heads from an outside point of view. But you'll never see your own head from an outside point of view, because you are your own head. The way you see your own head is by what's around you. You see your own head by what you see. Your reality is your own head. And that'll awaken you. There goes distance. There goes any sense of externality. It's all in you. Funny, it's all in you. The world is inside your head. But your head is inside the world. What I see to be the world is in my head. But then my head, what creates the world, is also in the world. So it goes in on itself. And that's reality. That's like the galaxies you see, like the yin and the yang, it comes in on itself like this. And that's consciousness. I had a vision where I realized that all we are is consciousness. And that when we feel, so we have when we're with ourselves, right? When we're a kid, we're not resisting our own being. We're with ourselves, and ourselves is the thing that is most sacred. That's the thing that we're all searching for, is our own selves. And then when the idea comes that we can get ourselves from somewhere else, that we can actually get ourselves, when the idea is indoctrinated into us implicitly that we can get at ourselves, then when we feel uncomfortable, and when there's some sort of trauma in our life, we literally try to get at our own consciousness. We literally try to get at ourselves. And so most people are trying to get at themselves. In this vision, I realized that I myself and other people are trying to grab themselves, trying to grab life. That's clinging, attempting to cling. You can never cling to life. It's like clinging to smoke. You can never cling to it because you're the one clinging. You're the one that you're trying to cling to. How could you do that? Like it's like my own head is trying to get at itself. So it's like most of us are trying to do that. On the underlying basis of our anxiety is that we're trying to hold on to ourselves, but we can never hold on to ourselves. Our own head can never hold on to itself. So the point of Zen is stop trying to hold on to yourself. Stop trying to grab yourself, because you never could. There's no self to grab onto either. So it's like someone who becomes a Buddha realizes that they've been a Buddha the entire time. That there's nothing to do. You can't, as long as you're trying to get somewhere, you're going away from yourself. As long as you're trying to achieve something, get enlightenment, then you're going away from where enlightenment is, which is where you already are. So that's it. We're all enlightened. We're all a Buddha. No matter all the people, all the different forms of people and their different psychological states are all the same. It's all equal. Like the leaves on the trees. So it's about realizing that there's nothing to realize. And then that'll free you. But we've been indoctrinated into thinking that there's something to realize, something to get. Something to do in order to be ourselves. But it's ridiculous. Because you are yourself. So there's nothing, you can't control yourself. There's no controller to control a self. See, the idea that you're controlling yourself is really blocking yourself from acting, from doing things. But when you stop trying to control yourself, you're literally free. That's Nirvana. And I think that's it for today. Thank you.